to you. Now, obviously, I'm going to ask you things about things that happened 20 years ago. So, but if you're anything like me, your memories of working with Harold, stay pretty vivid and pretty close. I don't know how did you first meet him, or even before how you met Harold. What was your awareness of Harold from student days or school days even?
I feel, it was one of those things where I knew nothing of his work. I probably had seen one play, but I hadn't even been aware of it or something. I remember being asked to go for the audition, and it for Celebration, and sitting in my flat with my boyfriend, and he was going, "Oh my God, it's Harold Pinter." And for some reason, an old boyfriend prior to that at RADA was obsessed with Pinter as well. So it felt to me like a very male thing. I hadn't heard him talked about through any female friends. You didn't hear about, oh, you must do this monologue. The women weren't told about monologues for women. But I remember reading it and not understanding it, and being quite nervous about it. But I sort of feel that in my ignorance was a blessing in a way. There's an honesty about it, which I think probably appealed to him. I wasn't trying to do anything. The only thing I was told was Wendy Braslington. Do you remember the casting director? She put me up for it. She said, he likes ladies. Wear something nice. So I wore this. I actually changed to go in. I feel it's awful. I mean, I feel like I'm doing him a disservice by sort of talking about that. And the fact that I didn't put my foot down, I played along with it. But I put on this very long, sexy skirt with a slit up it, and it was to play Sonia in Celebration, who is, the maîtresse d'hôtel. Is it maîtresse d'hôtel or the maîtresse? It's a female equivalent of the maître d'.
You made it sound like exactly the right thing.
Yeah, I felt like it was. And I had to get up on stage and read for him, and there he was sitting. And I remember his physicality is so sort of deliberate, isn't it? He doesn't apologize for the way that he approaches, and the way he would come up on stage with you just to give you a note and then go back and take his own deliberate time. And it felt, you felt that he cared because he did that. That physical, and he did that a few times with me, I feel, where he wants to make a point. He singles you out. You're not one of the masses. You're not just a minion, a puppet who's speaking his lines. He wants you to feel important. And I think that is definitely the legacy of him being an actor and appreciating actors. But I remember reading it and doing it and not being quite sure and leaving. And then Wendy came out and she said, "How do you think that went?" And I said, "I've got no idea. I have no idea." And then she went back in. She said, "Stay there a sec." And she came back out with him. She said, I'd like you to do it." And it was just like, oh, wow. You couldn't really believe it. I couldn't believe it. And then, of course, the doing of it, being around these Pinto files, these actors, these people who knew his work, who understood. I just remember thinking, I have no idea what I'm doing in rehearsal the first few days. I'm going to watch Lindsay Duncan and see what she does, and Leah Williams. I'm talking about the women here. And I remember everything was stripped away. There was no pretense. There was no acting. There was no embellishment. It was just playing the truth of the moment and the meaning and making it clear what was being said. Even if you didn't quite understand, you were speaking clearly. And so I just did that, and it was a real lesson. And of course he then talked about things like, you know, you have, if you follow the rhythm of his words, the meaning will come out of them. And if you, so therefore you obey his punctuation. And I feel like the older I get as well, the more and having worked with people like Martin Crimp, it's really like music. And I love that. It's not about, oh, but what does she mean? Or what's her subtext? You can do all that stuff. And you always, I remember Leah saying, it's exhausting, this stuff, even when it's funny, because there's got to be this huge tension going on underneath, this huge emotions that are sort of, they're there and they want to come out, but you can't really let them out. They've just got to be simmering underneath, and it's exhausting, and then there's the delicacy and the precision of his words. And he was brilliant about that. And he said, I remember having one moment where Sonia has this, she comes down and sort of talks, sees if everybody's all right. And then she's talking about sex. And then suddenly she changes from sex and starts to talk about an ex-boyfriend, but he died. And she's sort of overwhelmed by this emotion. And I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this. I don't understand. And he got up from his chair and he approached me and he came, close and sort of said, whatever I can't remember exactly. I'll misquote him, of course. But if you're truthful, nothing you do is wrong. And that to me was like the biggest liberation that anybody could say. It's like, if obviously he wants you to say the lines he's written, and he'd make jokes about the writer. The writer seems to have written not or, things like that, which is lovely. Mm. But I just thought, to say that to an actor, that actually nothing you do is wrong if you're truthful, is like giving you carte blanche to create something. Mm. And I used to go home on the bus and I used to cry because I couldn't believe my luck. And I thought, and I was in my 20s, I thought, it doesn't get better than this. And I don't know if maybe this is the pinnacle of my...
I've peaked.
Yeah. And not because of the role particularly, but just the experience of getting to work with him on his work with such great actors. And then, of course, first of all, yeah, and then we opened that, and then he asked me to do Moonlight on the radio. And of course, you're in a rehearsal room and the writer, Harold Pinter, asks you, I was wondering if you'd like, do you know my play, Moonlight? Do you know it? Well, I thought it would be lovely if you did, and you can't believe that he wants to work with you again. And so I did that with him, and which he was in. Was he?
He was. I know that.
Not in that. Yes, he was in that version.
He was in it, and I know that because I was in it too.
Yeah. And so it was amazing to be part of something in a different medium as well.
So that was before One for the Road?
Before One for the Road. Yeah. And I think but before, I can't remember exactly. I did Remembrance of Things Past. Mm. He adapted. And again, it was like, I can't believe that he is, you feel championed, you feel seen. It's amazing. Mm. And it's the greatest compliment, I felt like he valued what I had to offer. Mm. And it's not, coming from someone like him, you can't take that lightly, Mm. It's amazing.
That was a hell of a company that you were in at the Almeida, wasn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
Andy and Susie and
Keith and Danny Dyer.
Danny Dyer,
Um,
Thomas Wheatley.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. And then we took that to New York, and it was really interesting to see, because he was quite anxious about taking it to New York, because he said, "Oh, they don't like my work as part of the festival." And I thought it was fascinating to hear his slight anxiety about it. And it went down a storm. Celebration went nuts. There were rounds. You know, people would give rounds after those little moments. It was incredible. And it was really lovely to be in a different country and see how he was valued and appreciated, and how much his work was. And and then we did One for the Road. Couldn't believe again. I can't believe he asked me to do that, and that was really astonishing.
Tell us how that happened, because, I mean, for you to have played with Harold in that play, there is, of course, you know, a pretty amazing video recording of that, as there is of Celebration. But the recording of One for the Road is sort of iconic to me, because the authority of it as being, it's beautifully directed, and it's very difficult to imagine ever being bettered as a production. Tell us how did that happen for you?
Well, I can't remember how I got the part. I can't remember. I don't know if, you know, Harold asked me directly, because he would do that sometimes. Like, for example, when we did Celebration, just to digress a bit, suddenly there was this phone call on the answer machine. In those days, we had answer machine, and it was just, "Hello, this is Harold. Call me." And I thought, "Oh no, what have I done? Oh God!" And he just wanted to tell me that somebody had said that somebody fancy had said my performance was good. And I just thought, God, to feel that you need to share that is amazing, you know. But One for the Road was amazing, because we hardly rehearsed. I mean, we did, but Harold was always with Robin Lefebvre. It was, you know, a couple of hours rehearsal in the morning, and then we'd go for a glass of wine round the corner, you know. And I remember Robin gave me some note, a good note. I can't even remember what it was. And Harold was quite defensive and immediately said, "Yes, but what she's doing is really, really rather extraordinary." You know, it was like, "Well, don't worry, you don't have to defend me. I can take a note," you know. But he was so lovely like that, you know.
But there must have been an intensity of a bond between you, because you had to endure such awfulness in the course of the play. He must have felt particularly protective of you, given that he had to treat you so abominably.
Maybe that's what it was. I never really thought about it. We just played in the moment, I suppose. And there's something I do remember when we were playing it in London. I do remember thinking, it was for the first time I thought, this is essential that we put this play on. So there was a sense of the fear and adrenaline that you get from putting on a play and hoping that people find it funny or whatever. It was different. I felt like I had a duty to go on stage and tell this story.
Right.
And that was, and I think in a way that sort of changes the way you play a little bit, maybe. Also, it was amazing to think that Harold has written both Celebration and One for the Road, two really different plays. And I just love that the knife edge balance that he asks us to walk along, you know, which I think is why Remembrance of Things Past is such a brilliant adaptation, because somehow within the sparsity of his language, he intimates so much possibility and so much nuance, and where Proust had written it all out. He had sort of, with very few words, he sort of created possibility, and I think that's amazing. I hope it gets put on again somehow.
I suppose it'll never be filmed, but
No.
there is a recording of it which I've listened to.
Is there? What, a radio version?
Yeah.
Not of ours. Of ours?
Yeah.
Oh, I've never heard it.
Well, I can share it with you. But do you remember anything about? I've never met Robin Lefebvre, but I admire the direction of One for the Road enormously, because there is so little to work with. Certainly from your point of view and Lloyd's point of view, Harold has it's a box of chocolates and he gets almost every single one of them. But you know, what do you remember about discovering how to play Gila?
I don't know. I mean, that's awful to say, isn't it? I just remember putting myself in her situation, and whatever that situation might be. I mean, there are so many countries that have terrible, what's the word I'm looking for? You know, like,
abuses of power?
What's the word I'm looking for? Human rights. Huge amount of countries that violate human rights. And I'd always been an Amnesty International member and followed all that, and had read lots of various accounts of people, and I guess of experiences from prisoners and human rights defenders who've been wrongly imprisoned and all that kind of thing. And I suppose I drew on that, and we sort of talked a bit about it. And I knew that was something that he had always been passionate about with his work with pen and all that kind of thing, you know. So yeah, but again, it's like, I feel very much like it's less what you bring to it and more what I don't even know how to describe it. It's sort of being present. That's why I don't like it when his productions are too clear and on the nose, and where I like it when things are left to the imagination, and the possibilities are a bit murky, that there's ambiguity there, because that sort of leads to the absurdity of horror and makes it potentially funny, and you sort of horrified that you've laughed at something that's cruel, or, you know. And I think that's what his brilliance is. And in a funny sort of way, the more you answer the questions of why, who, the more you're closing yourself down in a way.
So I take from that something that I've found to be true, that too much backstory in a Pinter rehearsal room can impede the actors in some ways, because there's not sufficient trust in what's actually on the page.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I tried very hard in Celebration to give myself a backstory and all the rest of it. And it doesn't really help. I mean, there are some, I think as an actor, sometimes you do need those stepping stones to help you remember why you're saying something, why you're changing tack or whatever. But often it can be a private thing, I think. You don't necessarily need to share it.
No. That's the best. That's the best backstory, is the one that no one else needs to know about.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
But also Sonia in Celebration is a profoundly mysterious person. She's a sort of citizen of the world, and she's had lovers from God knows where. and she's always fielding questions about her origins, isn't she? Which is so funny.
Yeah.
She knows what people mean when they say, you know, tell us about your background.
Yes.
That's Harold sort of calling out casual racism, isn't he?
I guess he is. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, just to keep talking for a moment about One for the Road. I mean, I played a play of his called Party Time, which was quite traumatic, and there was a very I was portraying someone who'd been through a terrible situation, and I know it taxed me in ways that no other play ever had. Did you find that coming off stage from One for the Road left you in an altered state to some extent, or that you needed to come look after yourself afterwards?
Yes, a little bit, to a certain extent. But again, I was just so happy to be working on stage with Harold and sort of expressing the story. And Gila felt like it was coming out in the performance of it. It was so I could when it was over, you sort of shake it out and it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you do live with it for the duration of the run and stuff like that, but no, it wasn't too bad.
So when you went to New York for the festival at Lincoln Center, am I right in thinking that you were playing Celebration and One for the Road in Repertoire?
Yeah.
That's mad.
Yeah. And we were doing Celebration in a smaller theatre. I don't remember the name of the theatre anymore. And then One for the Road in a huge barn, as part of with a kind of Alaska with Penelope and that was amazing. And I used to watch that and listen to it on the tannoy and just found it so wonderful. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it wasn't too bad because I never did one of each on the same day. You know, it was kind of, I can't remember how long we were in New York for, but it was a very lovely schedule, you know. It was great.
And was Harold happy in New York once the shows were on?
Yeah, we had some real knees ups in that hotel bar. We did some big old dancing, me and Harold. He swept me off my feet a couple of times in the early hours.
Mm.
Yeah, and we used to go running with Michael Colgan, not Harold, and Antonia was there. So, and in the morning there was a few of us used to go running around Central Park, so our hotel was around there. Sometimes Michael didn't come; he didn't go to sleep at all.
He was a wild horse, Michael Colgan.
God, yeah. But there was some proper drinking went down in the bar. It was amazing. Yeah, there was some wild times that I daren't actually say. I mean, you know, when you've got Keith Allen and Danny Dyer in cast, you're lucky if they turn up.
Well, Danny did a documentary the other day, and he talked about some catastrophic moment of forgetting the lines in a performance. And
right, I don't remember that. I do remember him not being there for the 5. Yeah, both Danny and Keith didn't turn up to rehearsals at once. Had
right.
to be, but maybe don't put that in. I don't want to slander them.
What do you remember about Moonlight? I have I mean the radio of it. Do you remember anything? But especially about Bridget, you know, and about the nature of her presence, which is so, well, obviously haunting because she's dead, but it's such a mysterious play that.
I don't really understand the play. The thing is that, quite honestly, I'm probably really unhelpful because I couldn't tell you what the plays are about. I still don't feel I could necessarily, but I quite like that. I quite like, because I remember one of the Q&As after One for the Road, someone asked, well, not One for the Road, sorry, Celebration, but what's it about? What's it mean? Like, I think one of the things about his work is that he makes you feel things as an audience, and you don't always know why. And it's very disturbing. And I think it's quite unique and personal to each individual. And I like that. You know, if you're open and ready to be disturbed, shaken, then he's the one for you. But if you want some narrative, some pedestrian, no, they don't always have to be pedestrian, but, you know, something more straightforward that you can intellectualize, then you'll find it perplexing and frustrating and unnerving. He's unnerving. But I like that. And I think, like we were saying about not doing backstories, like, hey, I didn't always understand the plays. I couldn't tell you about Moonlight, really. But you feel it. You feel that weird emptiness, sort of halfway, the sort of the ungroundedness of being in between two worlds or two places.
Mm.
And I think that's really exciting.
Yes. There is a very, the moon is one of those symbols, or maybe Harold wouldn't have accepted the word symbol, but it is one of those things that comes up again and again in his writing. He loves the moon. He feels a relationship to it, and he is in a profoundly mysterious relationship with the universe. I mean, there's a bit of a mystic about Harold. He didn't go around telling everyone about it, but there is something very engaged with the mystery of things. And I think sometimes the plays, Moonlight, for example, is an attempt on his part to grapple with one or two profound mysteries, including family, but also the question of life after death and what happens after.
And he feels things very deeply, I think.
Yeah.
But you know, occasionally we might have a conversation where he might talk about his family, his situation, and it was always very oblique, or it would be a little story about something, a letter that was left, a note, a moment. And I guess in a way, his plays are symbols, even if he wouldn't like, you know, the way he speaks about the moon, or the way, I can't even think of what those things might be, but an action a character might make is sort of a symbol of what they're feeling. And I think that's, and yet he's such a clever, intellectual human being as well, you know. Yeah. He never explains, but he feels, and I think you feel keenly.
Mm. We just did a rehearsed reading of The Dwarfs, which was Harold's novel, but which then became a play, and later Kerry Lee Crabb adapted it. And because it's set when he and his mates are all about 20 years old, all the actions that you've just been talking about are the most mundane and simple actions anyone could ever do, like drying up a cup, or making a cup of tea, or drawing curtains, or touching a table. And yet, because they are imagined through the vivid eye of a young poet, they have all the magnificence of a symbol like the moon, or a holy grail, or something, you know, charged with symbolism. But the most ordinary things have symbolism,
like his bus, you know, the bus routes.
Yes.
I mean, it means something else.
Yes. Well, it's to do with mythology.
Yeah.
It's the personal mythology, the inexpressible seeking language.
Yeah. And I love that, because I feel like, even because we do live in a very sort of talky, feely, touchy-feely world now, society, and we all have, lots of us have shrinks or whatever. But actually, how much of that is useful, or how much do we really express when we're using words so loosely and so unspecifically? Whereas I feel like he has gone to the heart of it. Also, I can't remember what the line was, but I remember saying to him, "Oh, you've used that line before, Harold." I think it was in Moonlight, actually. He said, "Well, if it's good, why not do it again?" And I realized after that, like the symbol of the moon, there are little phrases he uses over and over again throughout his work. And I love that. I think that's brilliant. It's like a little signature, isn't it? A stamp.
Yes, it's enough to make the cat laugh.
Yeah.
That's one of them. But also, I love those moments where a character says, "Oh, by the way,"
Yeah.
terribly light, and they're about to drop a bomb.
Yes, which he would do, I feel.
Oh, incidentally,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He loves those changes of direction, changes of pace, sudden jags away from the expected route into unknown territory.
Yeah.
We who worked with him when we were young were terribly lucky, I think, and Danny Dyer's documentary really highlighted this, that he had a natural. One of the things that I've noticed about Harold is he really had a number of mentors himself in his life. Older men, in some cases women. Peggy Ashcroft was definitely a sort of mentor to him. But, he had these older figures in his life who he loved. He loved being around his teacher, Joe Brearley. He loved being around MacMaster, the tragedian who took him under his wing in Ireland. He loved being around this man called Arthur Wellard, who was part of the cricket team, but who had played for England and therefore was a god. And Harold was able to, with totally unselfconsciously, to give to us as young actors what he received from those older people, which is a sort of blessing, a sort of, as you described earlier, really just being welcomed into this world and protected if necessary, but nevertheless empowered to do your thing.
Yeah, but I wish I'd known that at the time. You know what I mean? Like, I understood that here was this great writer who kept giving me work and who seemed to say, but of course, because he was Harold and he was quite scary in some respects, I got things wrong all the time. I was so awkward, and I would try, and if you try and make conversation, you failed, But he sort of forgave me. But I remember one day he'd come to see me because what did I do? I did The Country, Martin Crimp at the Court, and it was my first big part after Celebration, my first really leading role. And he came to see it with Antonio, and he was so lovely and supportive. And I was so I don't know if you should put this in, but I'm going to tell it anyway. Is that wrong? Shall I say it or not?
It's going in.
No, I won't.
Go on. You've got to.
I just remember one night coming in, because it was Owen Teale, Juliet Stevenson, Katie Mitchell directed it, coming in, and I was the youngster, and I really had not, I'd done stuff, but no one had championed me apart from Harold, and it wasn't a lead role. And here I was in a three-hander, and I remember coming in for notes before the beginning of the show and saying, Harold Pinter's in tonight, and Katie Mitchell said, "Oh, I would have been impressed if you'd said Beckett." And I was so hurt because I was so, I came across as showing off or something, which is why she probably felt she had to bring me down a peg or two. But I was really appalled and humiliated, actually. I felt humiliated by that response because, by God, she got it wrong. And then, of course, ironically, the following year, she was directing his work at the festival.
I auditioned for, he got me an audition with Katie. Katie, if you're watching, we love you.
Yeah.
He got me an audition, and she didn't give me the time of day. She really wasn't impressed that Harold had asked anybody to meet a particular actor.
Well, funnily enough, after that, Katie asked me to do, I auditioned Ivanov, that she directed the National. And Harold came to see that. And it was, do you remember the cricket, when we were all at the cricket club, the Oval? It was, what was that for? Was it for Arena? There was a big celebration. Was it for the Arena documentary? We all went to the Oval cricket.
Lords.
Lords. We went to Lords, and I saw Harold, and I said, Harold, you came to see Ivanov. Why didn't you come and say hello afterwards? Call me. I thought, oh God, okay. So I phoned him the next day. Come round. When can you come over? And so I went round, and I went into his shed in the bottom of the garden, and we had a glass of wine. And he said, you know how I feel about you. I don't know what you were doing in that play. as in my performance, not why I was doing Ivanov. And we talked about it, and I just loved his honesty, and also the fact that he had avoided me until I confronted him, you know. But also he had admitted that I think I had, you know, it was in that bid to be truthful and play your action strongly.
Mm.
We ended up just shouting at each other and doing a lot of this.
Right.
And I remember actually saying, well, I said, so-and-so's not really listening to me. Well, you need to play your action stronger. And I remember thinking, yeah, but if they're not listening to me, no matter how strongly I play the action, they're not going to hear it. So I think there was a lot of that kind of over emotional, kind of meaningless for the audience, I feel. Well, I was certainly guilty of it. And I loved him for, I felt loved that he said that to me.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love that he didn't tell you until you made him. I love that. He once came to see me in a Rossini opera that I was singing in, but I had no right to be singing in it. So the only thing I could do to make up for the fact that I wasn't a good enough singer was to sort of spoof it so much that, frankly, what I was doing was extremely coarse.
Yeah.
Quite funny, but nevertheless. And I knew that Harold and Antonia were in the Queen Elizabeth Hall, and after the interval, their seats were empty.
Oh.
We sort of agreed never to speak of it. He sort of said, I'd had enough. He just couldn't take a second act of something that was just a little bit too coarse and crude, and you know, he had standards musically.
Yeah, fair enough. And with acting.
Oh, yeah. God, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then we did that thing on the radio again, which had bits of One for the Road in it.
Yes, I was in that too. James Clark, Voices.
Yeah, Voices.
Yeah, I've sometimes inflicted it on a class of students when they've got a bit too big for their boots. I make them listen to Voices. It shuts them up. It's very alarming. I mean, it really is awful, harrowing, but brilliant in a way.
Yeah.
But I don't think they won't do it at the proms any day soon.
No, I remember when we went to listen to it. It was the first time I'd seen Harold with a stick, and it was so shocking to me.
Mm.
Yeah.
I once, because I still live only a mile really down the road, and I was once walking in Holland Park, and he came towards me with his stick and in a coat, and he didn't see me, and you know, we saw a lot of each other, but I was so shocked that I didn't stop him. I didn't say, Harold, how, you know, I just observed him. And it was shocking when he was physically not himself. That was really hard. I think to some extent, again, I think a gang of us were his kids, you know, and we looked at him with the love of a father. And
yes, definitely.
I'm seeing Douglas Hodge tomorrow, and Douglas was definitely, you know, one of those.
God, yeah.
One of those kids.
Doug, yeah, definitely.
How would you? Because you do a bit of teaching these days, don't you? How would you?
No, I haven't done any for a long. I mean, I did a bit of stuff in prison, but I haven't really taught kids. I suppose I've done workshops, but not really.
Right.
I daren't say teaching. I'd love to. But
Well, I mean, I've been working in drama schools for years, but I don't think of it as teaching. I think of it as passing stuff on, really.
yeah.
Actually. But what would you pass on of that you've learned from Harold?
Well, certainly what he said to me about when you're truthful, nothing you do is wrong. I think certainly that. And the respect of the text. And a sense of loyalty. I just feel like everything that we've sort of talked about already, that, I don't know. He had what was so mysterious about him was that he wasn't straightforward to talk to, and yet he was at the same time, because what he gave you was true in a way. He wasn't, there was no frippery and sort of falseness. He was honest. And I think that's definitely, in terms of his work, it's just, he had an incredible work ethic, and yet he knew how to have fun,
Mm.
But I think it is about the respect for language. I feel like now, the more I do, the more I have learned from him and working with him about, and the frustrating thing is half the time it's not up to par, with his quality of writing. So you can't think of it as a music score, but actually I feel like, obey his punctuation and speak his words, speak them aloud, feel that rhythm, and see what it does to your body in a way, and be true, be truthful.
Mm.
Yeah. But I love his absurdity. Yeah.
Do you know what? I think we should stop there.
Are you sure? I'm sorry, I feel like I haven't got enough.
No, it's lovely. It's perfect. It's perfect because, apart from anything else, you love him, and that just comes through in everything you say. And to quote him, when there is nothing more to be said, one should say nothing.
Just one thing though, but when you don't realise how much he cared, he actually cared. I wish I'd known that, because I remember at the memorial service that was at the National, and one of his old muckers from Australia, Mick, said, "Oh, I know you. He wrote about you, and he said he thought he'd found someone who could do his work."
Mm.
And that was like mind blowing, and actually I carry that with me now.
Mm. Mm.
Makes me want to cry.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if do you remember Jill Johnson? Yeah. She was in that Moonlight with us.
Yes.
A couple of years ago, she said to me, she's about 90 now.
Wow.
She said, "You do know Harry, don't you? How he felt about you?" I said, "Well, we had a great." She said, "No, but he regarded you as his son." And I went at that point. Because Jill on Harold's 25th birthday, Jill bought him, because he asked for it, a hairbrush. Jill knew Harold.
Wow.
Better than anybody, except maybe Henry. And she told me that Harold talked about me as if I was his own son.
Gosh.
And I didn't know. And I knew in my heart, but I didn't know that he talked about me in that way.
No.
It's the most extraordinary thing to then carry with you, and it teaches you to believe your heart.
Yes.
Which is so important, not to belittle one's own body. The heart is housed in the chest, and to really have faith that the things that we are connected to at depth. You and I we've never done much work together, but I've always felt, and with Doug and one or two others, that there is this sort of sibling connection between us.
Yeah.
And no one can take that away.
No.
And it means we're blessed beyond riches, really, whatever happens.
Definitely. I know. Oh, Harry, it's so lovely to talk about him.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is. But you've done more than enough, and I'm so grateful to you. And thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. And I want to do more of his work.
I know.
I
Well,
feel it's not finished.
I don't want to ask such a question, but, you know, you should be in old times any day now. You should have played Betrayal, and you still should.
I do want to. I want to.
Well,
hopefully it's not too late.
May it be so. Inshallah. While you're in New York, you should go and see Todd Haynes or someone and tell them that you're available. It's terribly hard to get Harold's plays on now because it's all such big business.
Right.
Anyway, may it be so. I hope to see you in a Pinter play ASAP. If we ever go to the theatre again.
Don't. I know. We will. We need stories, don't we?
We need stories, but we're going to have to find new ways to tell them, I think.
Yeah. But presumably students are being imaginative.
Well, I haven't got any at the moment. I'm supposed to be going back and doing more with some, but I fear there may have to be a full lockdown any day now, because universities are hotbeds of viral load.
That sounds a bit rude.
I know, that's disgusting. Listen, lots of love and have a fabulous time, and keep in touch always. And thank you so much.
Much love. Thank you.
Thanks, Indira.